Hey guys, welcome back to another video. Today I have something a little bit different to share with you guys. And have you guys ever felt like I have that, hey, what would happen if I just stick to one knife, one good custom knife? How would I choose that knife? If I've already tried a lot of customs, and let's say I want to let go of them and I just want to keep one, or I have a lot of production knives, which, I have so many of them. How about I just sell all of them and buy, use that money to buy something really special? What should that one custom knife have? What should it be? What would the criteria be? Well, I don't know if you guys ever wondered about that, but I have. So I came up with, a list of five things, um, and I guess I want to use this knife. This is the Shirogorov full custom Hatium, and I kind of want to show you how this knife would fit into that framework. So here we go. To have just one custom knife, the first thing that you would have to have is good aesthetics. And in this case, it's very subjective. Aesthetics is something that is going to look appealing to you visually. But something that is not as subjective is that it's going to stay this good looking even after you carry it a lot for a year, 2 years, 10 years. How do you find that knife that still looks good even after you carry it? Number two is the functionality. It's going to cut well. It needs to have a very smooth and consistent action. It's going to be nice and easy to carry around. Number three is the serviceability. So if something does happen, how would you get it fixed? Does the maker offer you free spa? Is it paid? Is he fast? What does that look like if something were to happen? Number four is the rarity of the knife. This is, again, just my personal opinion. If you just want to have one knife, you would want to have something that is just special to you, that no one else has. So something that's more rare, of course, is just nicer to keep. And the last one is a unique, X factor, that it is something that only this knife has, or maybe this maker has that no other maker has. So yeah, let's walk through it. The first thing on this Hatium is let's go with the aesthetics. For me, this is very visually appealing. When you have, the black color and a mirror polish blade like this, black frame on both sides, I think it's just, very, very classic even, so it won't really go out of style. And I think it looks very good. If you check out the blade, it is a mirror polish stonewash blade, and the camera will really have a hard time focusing. But having a stonewash mirror means you get the nice aesthetic of that mirror polish, but you won't be afraid to use it because it's already been lightly stonewashed, so you won't put extra marks on it that you'll notice. So again, it looks nice and it'll stay even nice looking going forward. Moving on to the frame, let me close up the blade so it doesn't have a hard time focusing. Going to the frame is made from carbo tie. Again, this type of carbon fiber is very scratch resistant. I think carbon fiber in general is quite scratch resistant, but when you have milling patterns like this on knives, whether it's carbon fiber, titanium, it'll all be quite scratch resistant. And if you look on the frame, or the lock side of the frame, it's been stonewashed or tumbled. And the color, actually, it's surprising when I got it, the color matches the carbon fiber really well. And again, this is super scratch resistant because it's, stone washed, and it's got that milling pattern all around. So for me, it looks really good, and it'll stay looking good for a long time. And in terms of, the aesthetics in general, I really like how you have the aligned pivot over here. It's facing directly up, which is nice. I don't know if that's what it's meant to be or if it's just luck, but I do like that it's, facing upwards. You also got, the two little, I guess, grooves, you may call it. That also faces the same way. You even have milling patterns on the side here, which looks very nice. And speaking of good looking, I really like how Sergey matches this inlay with the frame. If you notice, the milling pattern goes in the same direction as the milling pattern of the frame, which is really not easy to do, and I really appreciate this visual touch. Even on the back side it matches. It's just really, really nice. And again, the milling pattern on this side looks good. Carbo tie, this one shines really nicely in the light. I think it looks very good. And another nice visual effect is the duckbill pivot, which Sergey does on his customs. So you get a custom pivot for both, the frame, body screw, and the blade, which they're all very nice touches. There's even small details such as, the hole and the blade here, which not many people do to keep this weight down. And yeah, I think, there's quite a lot of detail on this knife. People say that, oh, it's a machine knife, so there must not be a lot of work, but actually all of this is a lot of work. To do all of this milling just right takes a lot of time and effort. And check out, for example, the backspacer. You have to hand polish this part, but then, you keep the insides milled, which is super cool, very nice touch. Same thing on the jimping. You have the lighter part and the darker part below. And the pattern where this is longer and getting shorter and slimmer is also really, really nice. Coming to the end of the blade, you also have a slight diamond pattern that you do, on these pieces, which is another nice touch. The blade is actually S90V, so to mirror polish it takes a really long time and a lot of effort. That's just awesome. You also have a nice hand rub on the swedge, and very high polish hand rub on the flats. And again, the blade shape is, for me, is very classic. It's aggressive looking, but yet, simple looking, but aggressive. It's got a touch of modern there, which I really like. So that, does it for the aesthetics part. Next, let's jump into the functionality. For me, the functionality is very good on this one. Again, I showed you the blade already, but this is one of the first knives, I believe, or one of the slimmest knives ever that Sergey has made. It has a 2.5 millimeter blade stock, and if you know anything about slicing tasks, because I mostly use the knife for slicing tasks, nothing like prying or anything like that, which means cutting and slicing is something that I want most in a knife. So having a really thin blade stock makes the knife much slicier. I've had a few full custom Shirogorovs in the past, and if I have to admit, they're not super slicey. Even the production ones, they're sharp, and you can cut paper, you can cut boxes. But if you want to try, let's say, using it on fruits, the thicker blade stock kind of wedges into that, fruit, or even the boxes. It makes it more difficult to cut because of the thicker blade stock. And if you wonder why all the, fixed blade kitchen knives, they're not super sharp, but you can always use those to cut fruits, that's because it's, a thin blade stock. So obviously, it's easy to cut. Even paper is super thin. It's not meant to cut, but because it's so thin, it can cut you accidentally. So in the same concept, having a very thin blade stock means if you cut this, through fruit or something like that, it's much easier than something which is thicker, and it feels much sharper too. So you can really tell when using it that this is very much sharper than other knives. Even if the edge is more dull, it can still cut, very well, because it is thin by nature. And having the same taller profile, because this is a full-size knife, almost I think a 3.75 inch blade, depending on how you measure it, or 3.9, depending on how you measure it. It's just very tall, so you have a lot of area where you can grind down the blade to make it ultra slim, which it is very, very sharp. So for me, this very thin blade stock, it makes it optimal for something to carry. And again, this blade steel is S90V. It's Sergey's favorite blade steel, and to be honest, out of the many customs that I have had, for example, like the lock saw from Scott Cook, he also uses S90V, and it's because it's got just the perfect amount of hardness and toughness, in my opinion. It lasts really long, and it's also tough. Which means that with a thin blade stock like this, you would not want to go with something like M390 or S125V or something that's hard. Even I worked with Eric Touch before, another custom maker, to make something that's basically nearly this thin. He said, let's use S90V. I can't do Damacore. It's too hard, and it might crack more easily. So again, this is like the perfect blade steel. And another property of S90V that I've noticed is that the edge is more grippy than others. So even though this one has a mirror polished edge as well, it feels more, it grabs the material better when you cut through things. Whereas, again, as 125V or M390, it doesn't grab the material as well when you cut through something. And I just feel like when you have that little grab, it makes it a lot easier to cut. Next is the weight of the knife. This is, again, a full-size knife at, I'm guessing around it, let's say a 3.8 inch blade. This weighs in just around 3 ounces, 89 grams, which is super light for something this large. And for me, weight and slimness is most of what matters when it comes to carrying a knife, because you can have a smaller but thicker, heavier knife as well, which I won't prefer, because it feels heavier in the pocket, it feels bulky. But something that's like 3 ounces, that's super light, and you often, at even a knife of this size, forget that it's in your pocket. So, the combination of the slimness of the blade, the carbo tie scale, and I forgot to mention the milling inside. the milling inside is crazy nice. And it's very clean. All of it is very well done. It's been worked through and cleaned up. But even the milling inside, all of it helps with lightening the knife, so it's very easy to carry. Okay, so, and then another part of the functionality, obviously, is the action. How reliable is the action? Is it easy to release the lock? Does it hurt your finger when you flip it? But this one, it's super easy to deploy. It's got just the right amount of jimping on the blade, just the right strength on the detent. Of course, Sergey is known for his great action. But it's no surprise that this full custom would also have a very good action, very smooth shot, very smooth opening. So yeah, functionality wise, this it's perfect. It just ticks all the boxes. Next is serviceability. I don't know how many of you guys have had issues with your knives and servicing knives, but I have had quite a few experiences because I carry a lot of my knives. Some of the makers are impossible to reach, so you can't ever service them. Some of the makers do, service knives for you, but it takes a year or 6 months or a few months, which, I don't really mind that much as long as it's fixed. If there's, God forbid, an issue with it somehow, somewhere. But with Shirogorov Customs, you don't need to worry about that. I've sent in 2 Shiros in the past, one for aesthetic fixes and another one because I forget what, but it had something to do with the detent or the lock bar, something like that. And both of them took a really, really short amount of time, which is super impressive. And that the knife, like the brand, is super strong, so it'll be there for a long time. It's not like the maker can disappear overnight because he's not doing so well, but he's one of the most well-known makers. If you have a full custom, it'll get fixed really fast. I think if you have a custom division or a production, it'll take quite a bit of a longer time for it to be spot, but this one will be much faster. And you can work with Recon 1 if you're in the US. I'm not in the US, but I still work a lot with Recon 1. He's one of my favorite retailers, and he's super helpful. You can send a knife to him and he arranges everything with Sergey, so you don't have to do anything. You just tell Sako at Recon 1 that you need this done, and he'll help you out. So yeah, I think in terms of like sending it to makers, it's quite easy. Another aspect of the serviceability is fixing something yourself, doing quick maintenance, opening up the knife. This knife is not so good on that. It's not as good because, and I have taken it apart before, is because there are quite a few parts inside as well. The PLDS system is easy to take apart. Actually, the PLDS system, it helps quite a bit with putting the knife back together, but there are some quirks such as the roller bearings, which are not captive. So if you take it apart, it'll start rolling everywhere, so you need to be a little bit careful about that. But to be honest, you don't really need to take it apart or at all for a full custom. I've had many knives in the past, and if the knife is functioning and it's reliable, you don't really need to take it apart, unless something's actually wrong, like you have sand inside that you want to get out. Then you have to take your time to take it apart or clean it or whatever. So, I think at least the most important part for serviceability is that the maker can help fix it for you, and this passes it very well. The next one is and the rarity, or how hard it is to find custom Shiros. In general, custom Shiros are, again, hard to obtain because the price is so high. And he, although he does go to many shows and he does have lottos, so you have chances there. You often have to fight auctions against other really, well-known collectors who pay a really, really high price. So it's, in itself, it's hard to find because the demand is very high and the supply is lower. But what makes this particular one special, which no other Shiros have, is that it is the winner of the 2023 Blade Show Award for the best machine-assisted knife. So there we go. At least there's a unique batch in this one. We didn't just win it off a lotto. It's a special one that there's only one that won the award for Sergey at the show. So I find that a little special. But the last one, and arguably one of the more important factors for me personally, is the X factor. Something that is unique to this maker and something that's really difficult to replicate or impossible to replicate. Sergey has quite a few things, but the two main things are, number one, the PLDS system, which is in this is the third version of the PLDS. And for those of you who don't know what PLDS is, it's the Pivot Load Distribution System. And what does that mean? Exactly what it has in the name. It distributes the load on the pivot. So traditionally on a knife, the weakest part of a folding knife is, the pivot or the super thin lock bar, but usually the pivot. And that's because when, let's say the knife is open and the pivot, you have a regular size pivot. The screw inside is actually much thinner than this hole. So it can be quite thin. And imagine if you're like thrusting or cutting into something, what does that screw hold on to? The scale, right? So the contact point between the screw and the scale is a small hole on both sides. And that's essentially what's, keeping the knife together. So the area on which it has to take pressure is quite small because it's only on the scale on both sides and the pivot is small. What the PLDS does is that it distributes the pressure when, let's say, when you cut or thrust around the knife. I don't have a good picture of this, but if you see Sergey's Instagram, he shows it in, a CAD file where he breaks it down, and you can even see a little bit on here. You see how the scale lifts up, let's see on this side, and you see how this pivot is actually linked to a much bigger unit. It's because the unit inside spreads out around the frame, and also into, inside it goes even deeper. It comes around like here. So it's integrated itself into the frame. So it's like the pivot itself is part of the frame. So when you thrust, it's not just that little point here. It's the whole section here, which takes the load or the pressure when you cut into something or thrust into something, making it much stronger than regular systems. And again, that's something that is can't be copied by other makers because Sergey does have a patent on this one. So it's really cool. Another pro on the PLDS system is that you don't need to have any thread lock. You don't use any Loctite and it will never come loose. Why is that? It's because there are two pivot screws, and what you're looking at right here is the outer pivot screw. There's actually one more that's inside, right below this one. And the way it works is, when you tune the knife, you tune the inside pivot screw. If the knife is not centered, for example, when you tune it, you tune the inside screw, and that will make it center. It'll set the tension right. And then the outside screw essentially locks it in. So you screw this onto the inside screw, so the inside screw can't move. So that means it won't back out even if you flip it, 10,000 times, because the outside screw is locked in. But not only that, the outside screw is reverse threaded, so it goes the other direction. Normally you have to go clockwise to tighten, right? But then on the outside screw, you do counterclockwise. So when it's reversed, that means when this one comes loose, the outside one becomes tighter. So, it kind of locks everything in place. And it's been working really well so far. I mean, you gotta torque it in pretty hard, and then it'll just stay there, It's been working really well for me, and it hasn't come loose. I flipped it a ton of times, and it, I guess, works as advertised, which is really cool. I think that's the main innovation on his newer knives. There's a few customs out there that have, the new 3.0 system. And just to touch quickly, the 3.0 system is the update to the 2.0 system. The 2.0 system has the outside screw, which goes in the same direction as the inside, and then when the blade flips, it loosens the pivot, and it loosens it for both. So that didn't work out as well. But this one, because it is reverse threaded, it keeps it in nicely. So that's the update there. The second thing that Sergey does on his customs for a long time now is the double row roller bearing systems, which again inside, if you are newer to Sergey's customs, regular bearings are just little balls, right? Little balls placed around the pivot, which means that if you have a lateral force moving this way, side to side, the pressure is on the ball. And imagine a ball in contact with the frame. It's a very small point, which means it's the load is quite heavy on each of the small ball, so it's not as strong when you have a huge weight on it. But what the roller bearings are essentially they're rods, little rods, and they're placed in two rows, one inside row, one outside row. And this spreads out the pressure a lot better. So again, it's a similar, pro to the PLDS system. The PLDS system spreads the load. The roller bearings also spread the load. So it is stronger if you ever try to bend the knife side to side. Well, I think, the system is a little bit overkill because I don't think I'll ever use the knife that hard, but it's still nice to know that it is super strong and it's unique to Sergey Customs, so you can't really find it anywhere else. And I guess the last unique point about this knife is, again, the 2.5 millimeter blade stock, which is, I believe, the first and the thinnest blade stock that he's ever done. And it works really well. I think it's just perfect for this knife. So there we go. I hope this video wasn't too long, but I hope I got to point out that, hey, if you're looking to get just one nice custom knife, what should you look out for? And how does this fit into that picture? So yeah. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. Catch you next time. See you.